1:30. I'm going to call to order the meeting, the McHenry County Zoning Board of Appeals. First of all, I would like to say to any members of the public, if you would like to sign in, there was a sign-in sheet in case you might be wanting to speak or ask a question, you need to sign in. So if you have not already done so, it looks like we're missing like maybe 3 people who have come who have not signed in. So I'm just asking you to do that. And then also, before we begin the hearings, there's been some changes in the state laws regarding solar farms in Illinois. And so our zoning ordinance has had to change as a result. And I would just like our staff to kind of just update members of the public, just so that you're aware of what powers we as a zoning board have or don't have as far as these hearings. So Kim, if you would please update everybody on.
Yeah, so just to summarize, basically the end of January, the state of Illinois did pass new laws for siting of solar farms. They have some restrictions that are less restrictive than our previous regulations. We did update our ordinance to match what the state has put forth. But basically they have stated that as long as the proposed solar farms do comply with these regulations that they have put forth in these new laws, that the counties do not really have the ability to deny them as long as they meet those requirements. We can impose conditions, things like that, that will make them, easier to handle for neighbors if there's any concerns like that. But just so that you understand, and I will just read this section of the new state law just so that you are aware of how that is worded. A request for siting approval or a special use permit for a commercial wind energy facility or a commercial solar energy facility or modification of an approved siting or special use permit shall be approved if the request is in compliance with the standards and conditions imposed in this act, the zoning ordinance adopted consistent with this code, and the conditions imposed under state and federal statutes and regulations. A county may not adopt zoning regulations that disallow permanently or temporarily commercial wind energy facilities or commercial solar energy facilities from being developed or operated in any district zoned to allow agricultural or industrial uses.
Okay, thank you. So the first petition we're going to hear today is application number 2023-016. The applicant is ASD Wildcat Illinois Solar LLC. The request is for a conditional use permit to allow for a commercial solar energy facility. This is part of parcel number 13-18-400-001. The property is located on the west side of Dean Street, approximately 3/4 of a mile south of the intersection of Dean Street and US Route 14 in Door Township, Illinois, and consists of approximately 43.145 acres. I would like to introduce the board member, or have the board members introduce themselves, starting on my left with your name and the township in which you reside.
Robert Kozin, Algonquin Township.
Donald Smolinski, Grafton Township.
I'm Linnea Kustra in Alden Township.
Vicki Gardner, Nunda Township.
Kurt Schnabel, Riley Township.
Jessica Beverly, Door Township.
So the petition today has been reviewed and the following items have been received prior to today's scheduled hearing. The publisher's certificate of publication from a newspaper is dated April 29th, 2023, and thereby meets ordinance requirements. The affidavit of posting was signed and date posted was May 1st, 2023, and thereby meets ordinance requirements. Affidavit of mailing was signed and date mailed was April 27th, 2023, and thereby meets ordinance requirements. The survey has been checked against the petition, the legal notice, and the publication in the newspaper, and all 3 match. Filing fees have been paid. The endangered species consultation has been received, and the McHenry County Soil and Water Conservation District report has been received. At this time, I would recognize the petitioner and also anyone else that would like to ask a question or give a statement. If any members of the public are going to want to be able to ask questions and make a statement, I would want to swear you in right now. So anyone who would like to speak during this hearing, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Okay, so for the benefit of members of the public, how this hearing works is the petitioner will present their case to us, what they want to do, and then after they're finished with their testimony, they will be asked questions by members of the board. When we're finished, then there can be questions from staff, and also the public will be able to ask questions. If you want to ask a question, we ask you to limit your questions to 3 minutes. You'll need to come up to this microphone over here on my right and state your name and your address, and then you can only ask questions regarding their testimony. Then after the testimony has all been given, we will have testimony from staff. They will summarize their staff report. At the end of that, if you would like to make a statement on this petition, regarding this petition, you can make a statement. And again, your time is limited to 3 minutes. We'll have a timer going on. We have 3 different petitions we're hearing today. So if it's not on the one that where you live or that affects you, you might want to save your comments for the one that affects you directly. So at this point, I will let the petitioner introduce themselves and go ahead and start with your testimony.
Ladies and test.
And if there's 2 of you, if you'd like to use that other microphone while you're giving testimony before the public needs it, you're welcome to do that.
Great. We could probably just share this one. And,
Okay. Okay, fine.
Sounds good. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for attending today's public hearing. My name is Mike Larkin, and I work for AMP Solar Development Incorporated. You may hear us refer to it as AMP Energy, as we sometimes call our company, but AMP Solar Development Incorporated is the full name. I am a manager on the development team here at AMP, and I am in charge of AMP's Illinois Community Solar portfolio. And I'll let my colleague introduce himself.
Hey guys, I'm Brant. I am an associate on the development team, and I work on the land origination team, helping us select sites, and I speak with landowners to help kind of answer their questions.
Great, so the first item on the agenda here is ASD Wildcat Illinois Solar LLC. ASD is just an acronym for AMP Solar Development, just a tag that we typically put at the beginning of the project name for our sites. Next slide, please. The agenda today, I'll just be giving a brief introduction to AMP, then I'll be explaining briefly how community solar works. Then we'll run through the components and the tentative project schedule. And finally, I'll do a site plan walkthrough. For the site plan walkthrough, Kim, am I able to go up to the screen and just kind of point around? Okay, so I'll do that for that section. So first, the introduction to AMP. So AMP is a US-based independent power producer. We have our headquarters in Denver, Colorado. That's the office that I work out of, that me and Brant work out of. Excuse me. And AMP is a developer, owner, and operator of distributed scale renewable energy assets across the United States. AMP Energy specializes in community solar development, and we are currently developing or operating projects in Illinois, New Mexico, New York, Massachusetts, Minnesota, and working to expand in a few additional states. AMP's been active in the community solar market here in the United States for over the past 10 years, and we're excited about our plans for the Illinois portfolio here. AMP typically owns the projects long-term. We have a whole asset management team that monitors all the projects and deploys the contractors to do the various operations and maintenance tasks. So AMP isn't sort of develop and flip shop. We intend to own the project for its operational lifetime and to remain responsible for the operational upkeep of the solar farm. Next slide, please. So just a brief explanation of community solar here. So community solar is essentially a mechanism for typical utility ratepayers to participate in the green energy transition here in the United States, where it's essentially a virtual power purchase agreement where utility ratepayers, in this case for this project, it would be any utility ratepayer in ComEd, in ComEd's utility service territory, is able to subscribe to the solar farm, and the size of their subscription really just depends on the size of their load demand for their electricity demand. We typically try to assign a subscription size big enough to cover a year's worth of utility electricity needs. So the solar array itself feeds its power into the local grid. The utility company, in this case ComEd, applies those credits, those community solar credits, to the bills of community solar subscribers. And so that we attempt to offset most, if not all, of the power of the utility ratepayer with power that's generated with the solar farm, and then that power with those solar credits gets a 10% discount on the utility bill. It's not consistent every month. Obviously, solar is a variable resource, so sometimes we can meet all of the electric demand of the ratepayer, and sometimes we meet a little bit less, during the winter months where there's less sun. But we attempt to size it so basically 100% of the ratepayer's usage over the entire year is covered by the solar farm, and thus all of their electricity usage gets credits applied to it and gets that 10% discount. Next slide, please. Next, I'll go through the project schedule and components. So here's our preliminary development schedule for this project. Obviously, we're here right now in McHenry County looking to pursue the local use permit to allow the development of this type of project on the A1 zoned agricultural district. Assuming the permit is issued, the next step would be to apply to the state program, which is the Illinois Power Agency's adjustable block program, more specifically the traditional community solar block of that program. Those applications open up June 1st and have rolling applications through the summer. Last year's allocation, we saw the ABP take about 4 to 6 months to review all the applications. We're hoping that timeline will be tightened up here, and it'll take them about 3 months. So with that optimistic view, we're assuming the project would be awarded by the end of this summer. The next step after that would be pursuing the construction permit. So we'd be hiring an engineer for more advanced design, getting the stormwater plan together, getting the SWIP together, doing the drain tile surveys, making sure a decommissioning surety is funded and set up, and if there's a decommissioning agreement that couples it, making sure that's executed and satisfactory to the county. All those steps come before construction permit, and so then we would try to apply for a permit probably late 2023 here. Assuming that's granted and we have all of our paperwork and permits in order, then we would plan to start construction next spring, so about a year from now, and we plan to have construction complete by the middle of the summer, probably July 2024, and it would be fully operational by the end of next summer, assuming the schedule and everything goes to plan. But things can obviously push out in time too if some of those components of the permit take longer than expected. So as I mentioned, we are targeting the state program, the Illinois Community Solar Program, the traditional community solar block. And so that works where there's a set amount of megawatts allocated every year. These applications open up June 1st every summer, and projects need to meet a minimum threshold of points to qualify. The projects with the highest amount of points get awarded right away, and all the others that qualified but were ranked below get waitlisted for that incentive allocation. This array in particular will be targeting a pollinator-friendly solar array with the use of agrivoltaics. We have 2 seed mixes planned for this array, one for underneath the panels themselves and the racking system, and one in the buffers, so like the area between the panels and the outside fence, and then also the corridors within the array itself. This pollinator vegetation uses mainly native species, and there's quite a diverse mix. It'll grow, it's slightly taller species in the buffers and corridors themselves, since those won't interfere with the array in terms of shading, although they will probably require annual mowing at least once a year to manage. And then we have the more grass type species underneath the array itself, and with some pollinators in there, but those are shorter growing species. And like I said, we're planning to employ the use of agrivoltaics. So we'd be hiring sheep farmers to come out, and they bring their flock out at least 2 times a year, maybe up to 4 times a year, to eat the native pollinators and grasses below the array and in the buffers. And then, like I said, anything that is not consumed within the corridors themselves would likely have to be mowed at least once a year. Excuse me, we were working with a co-op there to source sheep farmers for those operational activities. And then the decommissioning plan, which I just thought would be important to highlight here. I know there's typically concerns with these solar arrays displacing valuable agricultural land, and I just wanted to make everyone aware that these type of developments are typically low profile and low impact. It's not a large introduction of impervious surface other than the gravel road itself and the concrete equipment pad. These panels are hoisted on tables that are hosted on racking posts that are driven to the ground. They're like steel I-beams. And so much of the surface underneath the array itself remains pervious and intact with that deeper root pollinator vegetation. And so it's basically like the field itself lays fallow for the operational lifetime of the facility. But we do have decommissioning requirements both with the county and the state that we'll need to ensure that we comply with. And that includes removing all components of the array and having a financial surety or bond or letter of credit set up to fund those activities if AMP were to no longer exist or to refuse to do so. And so the money will be in place, and that would pay for the contractors to come out and basically remove every component of the array, the racking tables, the posts, the panels, the fence. Sometimes we keep the access road just depending on the landowner's preferences, but that could also be removed. And like I said, the equipment pad and all of the equipment on there and sent out to be disposed or recycled. Next slide, please. So I'll just go up here to point around and show everyone, walk everyone through the site plan here. So we are on Dean Street here. As Kim mentioned, the property ID number, we have this L-shaped parcel owned by Mr. Walter Dalich. And currently there is a farm here operated by Mr. Larry Eddy, who's in attendance today. And the array itself would be tucked into the back part of the parcel here. You can see we have a 5 megawatt AC connection, so at any given point, the maximum amount of power we can supply to the grid is 5 megawatts, and an oversize of about 7 megawatts, so that allows us to produce maximum power for a longer period of the day. So the components of the project itself, we have an access road coming off of Dean Street here that heads directly west. And you can see along it here, we have our point of interconnection along an existing utility line on Dean Street here. It connects to 4 utility poles that have interconnection equipment hoisted up on those poles. And then the electric line itself goes underground, parallel to the access road. The access road goes across this first agricultural field here to get back into the site. And it enters, you see the purple here, a little hard to see, but that is the array fence that is 8.5 feet high, farm agricultural style fixed knot fence that surrounds the entire array. So the gravel road itself enters the gate of the array fence, and then you can see the array here. These panels are these table rows are oriented north to south, hoisted on single axis trackers, so the panels will be facing the east during the early part of the day, tracking the sun, and then going completely west at sunset to maximize solar radiative capture. So the array itself, like I said, it's panels hosted up on racking tables that rotate throughout the day, and then they're connected to string wires that either run underneath the racking table itself or buried in conduits to the ends, and they all conglomerate at the equipment pad here, the red rectangle that you can see here. The electric connection that I talked about earlier continues underground into the site and also eventually connects to the equipment pad. But on the equipment pad itself, we would have an inverter, transformers, and the string combiner boxes. The strings, like I said, are just the wires that are actually individually connected in circuit to the panels themselves. So the panels will be producing DC power, direct current, which will go to the equipment box the equipment pad, and the inverters on that pad will convert it to alternating current, which is the current that is supplied on the local distribution grid, and will be sent back out to the grid to the POI, the point of interconnection here on Dean Street. You can see we have a corridor around the array itself for access to the edges of the array. Like I said, the pollinator vegetation, this would be like a buffer area versus underneath the array itself would be the array vegetation. We did have a proposed vegetative screen here. I have talked to the tenant farmer here, and we, in the future, might make some slight adjustments to the plan to help better accommodate his agricultural operations. But for now, we do have the vegetative screen planned here. And then you can see here, this was just from the wetland survey. These are wetlands and wet areas and depressions. Currently, right now, there's a cow pasture to the north here and to the south, and so those would be maintained. And so, yeah, this array would just kind of be tucked in, like I said, this L-shaped parcel on the far western side. Just seeing if there's anything else I want to cover. Nope. And I think that's all I have. Thank you. Oh, I guess I could just cover this. Yeah, so we expect an annual generation of just over 11,000 megawatt hours a year. Looking at the average power demand of an Illinois residential household, that could support approximately 1,038 homes' power usages per year, and the estimated annual tax revenue for this site is just under $32,000 a year.
There's some certain standards in our zoning ordinance. There are some specific to commercial solar energy facilities. I would like you to address those. I mean, you don't have to read each one necessarily, but I want to make sure that you've addressed all those issues, all those standards that are in 16.56.030 principal use standards for a commercial solar energy facility. In our packet, at least for the board, I think it's on page 6. I don't know if you have the packet with you. And then there are also approval standards for a conditional use permit, general conditional use permit, and those are at the top of that page 6. I would like you to address those as well.
So number one here, that the petitioner has demonstrated the ability to meet any applicable standards contained in chapters 16.56 use standards and 1660 site development standards.
16.56 are those standards below, so if you want to go through those.
These ones? Got it. So for the application, a threatened and endangered species consultation, EcoCat, from the Illinois Department of Natural Resources is required at the time of conditional use permit application for any site that is 5 acres or greater in size and is currently in agricultural use or undeveloped. So yeah, we did submit our EcoCat consultation to the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, and their conclusion and report on that is located within the special use permit application. The site plan shall be provided showing all improvements, including structures, fencing, power lines, above and below ground, lighting, landscaping, at a detail sufficient to understand the location, height, appearance, and area. So yeah, I just ran through the site plan there, and it didn't show the full site plan that I submitted to the county here, but we did have some side profiles too, showing that the array itself at max tilt, will not exceed 15 feet. And we have proposed temporary, or not temporary, but just motion sense lighting at the equipment pad itself for operational activities. The project itself will not be regularly lit. Just maybe that one light at the equipment pad itself if we need to attend to a maintenance issue in the nighttime. I showed you the vegetative landscaping screen on there, and as you can see on the site plan itself, yeah, the location and appearance at the back of that property there, sort of tucked in. And there is some elevation change from Dean Street to the back of the property there. That does help partially block the view shed of the array from the road there. Part C here, all other application submittal requirements outlined in the Planning and Development Department zoning application packet as published on the McHenry County website. I believe, yeah, that we met the application standards and submitted all the necessary documentation as we coordinated with the county and getting the necessary documentation submitted to get on the docket here today. Next, under site plan, solar panel structures and electrical equipment excluding fences and power lines for interconnection shall be erected no less than 50 feet from any lot line, and no less than 150 feet from any residence other than the residence in the same ownership parcel. There is a residence on that parcel. It is at least 150 feet from that residence, but in terms of neighbors, all components of the array itself are, yes, at least 150 feet from neighboring structures. And then we did follow that 50-foot setback in the upper left corner there. You can see is the closest we get, but the fence line is just beyond that 50-foot setback there. Part B, no structures including power lines for interconnection may exceed 20 feet in height. Power lines shall be placed on ground to the maximum extent possible. So yeah, that's what I showed on the site plan there. The power line is most of the way trenched underneath the ground between the interconnection poles and the equipment pad in the center of the array. We do have 4 utility poles that we're proposing to erect very close to the point of interconnection, which is an existing utility pole along the circuit that goes on Dean Road. We've just found that it's easier to fit that equipment in a smaller space, being erected on poles versus on concrete ground pads. And so that's been our preferred method of interconnection equipment, and so that's why we went with that solution there. Lighting must comply with section 1660.020, exterior lighting. Like I said, we just have this single exterior light, which has motion sense capabilities at the center of the array at the equipment pad to allow anyone working on it to see the equipment pad, different components of it to service it. Solar panels shall have a surface that minimizes glare and shall comply with section 166040D, lighting and glare. These are Vicrum panels, and they have an anti-glare coating on them. So we don't expect much glare coming off the panels themselves with that anti-glare coating. The facility shall be situated as to minimize impacts to woodlands, savannas, wetlands, drain tiles, and encroachment into floodplains. All site development shall comply with the storm water management ordinance. Any damaged drain tiles shall be repaired. There aren't many trees that we're proposing to cut down. There's some like at the very edge of these ag fields that are just kind of scraggly, lower quality trees that might need to be moved. But other than that, we basically, minimize any sort of tree clearing of that nature as it is an existing agricultural field. And then you saw the wetlands on there too. We're avoiding all the wetlands that were delineated by our third-party environmental surveyors. The drain tiles, we will be required to map the drain tiles prior to the building permit. So we will do that survey and look at our sort of more advanced design, the exact location of where all our piles are, and see how that lines up with the drain tile survey. And so in the more advanced design, we may slightly adjust pile locations to minimize impacts to any drain tiles. Our agricultural impact mitigation agreement too also requires us to, as well as the standard, requires us to fix any drain tiles that are damaged from piling in those posts. So we'll stick to that commitment. And yet the project is not located on any floodplain. Part F, in order to prevent erosion, manage runoff, and provide ecological benefit, the facility shall be planted with low-profile native prairie species using a mix appropriate for the region and soil conditions per the Illinois Department of Natural Resource Standards, as amended from time to time. As I mentioned, we are proposing 2 different seed mixes here. Native prairie species are a large majority of that seed mix. Like I said, we'll be qualifying for the pollinator array designation here, which is standards that are set by the Department of Natural Resources through their pollinator checklist. So we will be meeting the requirements there and qualifying as a pollinator array per their standards.
Just for the sake of time, we don't need, did you want to read us all these, or kind of go high level on some of these?
You can go level, they just need to be
Yeah.
addressed.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't need to actually read the language for each one, but you need to address each point.
Got it, okay. Yep, so fencing shall be in compliance with National Electric Code. I believe we need to have at least a 7-foot fence and a 16-foot buffer. We propose a 20-foot buffer from the edge of the fence to the array itself. And we are not planning to use any barbed wire. The fence itself, we're planning is 8.5 feet high, actually. Yep, so there are some houses across the street that do approach the 500-foot setback that would require us to have landscaped vegetation. But honestly, the site is so far tucked back into the parcel that we are actually beyond that 500-foot. That being said, we're still planning on having that vegetative screen there per the plans that I shared. We do plan to submit and prepare a landscape monitoring plan that will be coupled with the agrivoltaic plan and maintenance plan to ensure the establishment of the pollinator species and grazing to be consumed species. And we are required to not only with the county, but with the state, submit regular reports on the progress of that. We have entered into an agricultural impact mitigation agreement with the Illinois Department of Agriculture. And we plan to execute a road use agreement with the appropriate highway jurisdiction. In this case is Door Township Highway Commissioner for the road permit. We do plan to prepare an emergency management plan that's acceptable to the county and local fire district as a part of the details that we'll gather to reach NTP and hire a firm to construct this site. We will have a sign posted with the name of the operator and phone number to be used for an on-site emergency, just in case. Access will be granted for periodic inspection to the county and the local fire district. We do plan to have a Knox box at the gate there that will be able to be used by emergency personnel. And yes, damaged panels will be removed, repaired, or replaced within 60 days. We are able to remotely monitor the systems and their output, and have a pretty good idea when something's wrong or something's damaged, and have pretty immediate knowledge of that, and then we can disperse our ground crew to inspect and resolve. So under abandonment here, Amp Energy doesn't plan to abandon the site, but if it were to occur, it would be decommissioned per the plan that will be executed with the county before the building permit here, and funded with the financial surety, whether it be a letter of credit, cash escrow, or bond, that is established to fund the decommissioning activities of the array. We do plan to submit an engineer's estimate of decommissioning cost for the decommissioning of the array prior to building permit issuance, and then the amounts of the surety that's put in place will meet the 150% requirement of the county there. We will comply with the updated engineer's estimate of cost for decommissioning to be submitted every 10 years. I think the form document that we shared for the decommissioning agreement even proposed every 5 years, but we will comply to the regular updates to the estimate to ensure the financial surety has enough value to cover all activities that go into decommissioning a solar array.
So then you go back to the previous page, the top of the previous page for the general standards.
Yes, we have demonstrated that ASD Wildcat has the ability to meet all the applicable standards in the use standards and site development standards. This site is situated that the proposed use is compatible with the existing or planned future development of the area. Like I said, solar is a low impact development, and the land can basically go back to any use after it's fully decommissioned, whether that be agriculture or another proposed use. And it's compatible with the current use as agricultural activities will still continue to occur on the unused portions of the parcel itself. Yeah, the project will And the operation and maintenance of this project will not be detrimental to endanger the public health, safety, morals, comfort, or general welfare of the neighboring vicinity. Solar panels themselves don't leach any chemicals into the ground, so it should really not have much of an impact on the water table. And assuming we get the correct stormwater plan in place, surface runoff and the amount that runs off versus what goes into the ground should not change with the final as-built conditions with the properly designed stormwater plan. Yep, the conditional use, the community solar farm shall not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity for the purposes already permitted. The parcel itself is surrounded by agricultural zoned parcels, and it should not affect the agricultural activities of the neighboring parcels. Conditional use shall not substantially diminish or impair property value within the neighborhood. I think I included a study within our special use permit package itself, looking at the effect of property values of residential properties in the immediate vicinity of community solar farms, and that study showed minimal impact. But like I said, this project will be fully decommissioned at end of life, and that, you know, that it's not a permanent development that will have lasting effects on the assessment of abutting properties. Adequate utilities, access road, drainage, and other necessary facilities have been provided. We do have the access road, the utility connection, and we'll make sure we have the appropriate stormwater design to deal with drainage. Adequate measures have been taken to provide ingress or egress so designed to minimize traffic congestion and hazard on public streets. Community solar farms have a little amount of travel and personnel on site. Probably once every quarter, there will probably be someone out there to check on things, and maybe more than that per as needed basis if anything fails or needs to be maintenance. And so yeah, we don't expect much impact on traffic other than during the construction period when all the equipment is being delivered and moved on site. The conditional use, the community solar farm shall conform to the applicable regulations of the zoning district, which is located in the A1 agricultural district. The project is reasonably in the interest of public welfare, helping offset carbon emissions in the electricity grid and providing discounted power to those who subscribe. And yep, adequate measures will be taken to provide protection to groundwater recharge and groundwater quality. The project itself will not use any water or have a water connection other than what's used to provide for the sheep when they're on site. Yeah, there should be no impact on groundwater recharge. As I said, we'll design an appropriate stormwater plan to make sure the pre-existing conditions of water percolating to the ground and water running on the surface remain in the as-built configuration.
Okay, thank you. I'll start on my left. Mr. Cozen, do you have any questions for the petitioner?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Could you just go through what other assets you have in Illinois, either existing or proposed?
Sure, so we actually don't have any operational community solar arrays within Illinois at this time. AMP originally applied to the Illinois Solar for All program back in 2018, with some sites further to the south in Ameren utility territory, that is McLean County and Clark County, Illinois. Right now, we're currently developing, we are still developing those sites down there in this new program, the traditional community solar program. So that's one in Clark County, that is 4 sites in McLean County. We've got one we are developing just south of here in DeKalb County. And then these 3 projects that are on the docket today here in McHenry County. We're also developing another site in Lake County, further to the northeast. Brant's been busy with his land origination duties, but we're pretty close to developing 2 more sites. They haven't been signed yet, though, and those are in different counties than what I had just mentioned.
In terms of site origination, just very generally, what brought you to this particular subject property? And if it's just market interest and so forth, I'll accept that unless members have other questions.
Yeah, we find that the number one kind of biggest project killer, the biggest challenge to get over is interconnection and having capacity on the grid. So that's mainly where we based our search off of. So that's number one.
So it was the service connection to the ComEd point that
Yeah,
you saw, the 12.5 kV?
yeah. Our indications from the software we have show that there's capacity there in ComEd territory.
You mentioned that you have subscribers that will be using this. Do you already have commitments for this site, or subscribers already lined up?
No, we don't start the subscriber acquisition process until, typically until we reach NTP, which means building permit's been secured, and an agreement with an EPC has been executed, and basically, yeah, all permits and paperwork are in place to start construction. That's typically when we start our subscriber acquisition campaign.
Just in the off chance that you obtain no subscribers, what does that do to your business plan?
So for the state incentive that we're applying to, the Part 2 application is an application that you submit after the project is constructed and completed and tied to the grid. I believe we have a 12-month deadline from when we reach substantial completion to have 90% of project size spoken for by local utility subscribers, and we'll have to share that information to the state to prove that we have met the threshold there. But obviously, we plan to subscribe 100% of the array, but yeah, I believe we're required to within a year of substantial completion. If we don't, then the REC award is not awarded, and we'll probably make every effort to get those subscribers, because that's an important component here.
And then I also understand you would then have a decommission plan to fold your tent and...
Correct, yeah. Before we even start building, we'll have that decommissioning plan in place and executed, and the financial instrument will be funded per the engineer estimate and to pay for those activities, correct, yeah. So by the time the project's built, that financial instrument is in place, and so yeah, if we weren't able to get subscribers after a year and decided that, you know, the array itself wasn't worth moving forward with without the incentive, which is probably really low likely because we've already committed the spend to building it, then yeah, we would either decommission it or move to use those funds to do so, yeah.
How long is the service time for your subscription, your subscribers? Is it day to day, year to year, month to month?
Yeah, so they accumulate credits every month, and it shows up on their bill every month. The terms of the actual offtake contract are the 20-year minimal operational lifetime of the array itself.
So your subscriber can't pick and choose different community solar farms throughout a month, or are they locked into that particular?
They would be, if they subscribe to this array, they would be locked into this one. We're limited in the size of ratepayer of load demand that we can supply on a single project. So I think it is theoretically possible for someone to subscribe to multiple projects. But yeah, it would just be solar credits generated, applied to their bill for this particular solar project if they're subscribed to it.
The timeline that you posted showed if I interpreted correctly, a 90-day construction window. Is that typical?
I'd say anywhere from 3 to 6 months. That was like probably our most optimistic schedule that I showed there. So it really depends on how deliveries line up with procurement. Sometimes we start the array piling, putting the panels in, and then the inverters won't show up till a little later. So that's probably the best case, 90 days, but that's really quick. Probably a little longer than that, yeah.
Using the IFP draft site plan, this is the one that's dated January 5th. You show 2 access gates. Why was it necessary to have 2 distinguishable access gates?
Yeah, there's one there at the front of the road on D Street.
Again, please identify yourselves
sorry.
because this is being recorded.
I'm sorry, Brant with Amp Energy. Yeah, I was speaking with the landowner, and he was hoping to have an access gate at that road because he didn't want people driving up on the access road.
So you'll address it to have 2 Knox boxes, then one at each one of the access gates?
That's the current, Mike Clark and Amp Energy, that's the current plan. On a future iteration of the design, we'll probably get rid of that fence there. So we'll probably just go with the single Knox box solution. But yeah, if we were to move forward with a gate there, then yeah, it would be 2 Knox boxes.
The distance from your interconnection point to your first riser is almost 1,800 feet underground. Have you sought an opinion on any loss or gain in terms of the service length?
Our engineers designs the site to minimize electrical losses. That's why the equipment pad is typically centered in the center of the array, because you get more losses with DC currents, so the longer it has to travel through those strings, the more resistance losses you get. So they kind of optimize the placement of the equipment pad itself. And then in terms of underground line going from the equipment pad to the riser poles near the street, I'm not aware of whether it was above ground or below ground, whether there's any change in resistance or electrical output with those 2 solutions. But that's pretty typical for us, having the 4 riser poles off the point of interconnection with the equipment hoisted there, and then it goes underground all the way to the equipment pad.
And you have a temporary construction area with parking. What is the length of the meaning temporary?
Just temporary in terms of only existing during the construction period. Then you can see there's a array over top of that, so it won't even be able to be used for the entire construction period. But most vehicles are arriving and being parked when equipment is arriving, including the panels themselves. So when those vehicles are dropping off equipment, that's kind of the planned area for them to stop and offload during the construction period.
Your access road is about 2,500 feet, 20 feet wide. What's the construction material of that access road?
It is gravel. I don't have some of the specifics, depending on the road and the ground composition. Sometimes we dig it out and lay maybe a geotextile fabric or something like that at the subsurface, but I believe our standard proposal is at least 4 inches of gravel, but that's pretty preliminary at this time.
Just to be clear, in terms of the dynamics of the PV modulars, you had mentioned, and just to confirm, it has an anti-reflective feature on it, and it is bifacial.
Correct.
And one last deep dive, Madam Chairman. The sensing mechanism for the emergency light, just how's that addressed in a rural area, the wandering something or another so it doesn't stay on too long, et cetera?
That's a good point. It typically just has motion sensing for if there would be movement on the equipment pad itself. So yeah, I do recognize that maybe a small animal could potentially trigger it if that's the motion sensing area. But we've used both motion sensing and manual switches. So we're open to an amendment there, but we don't expect it to be triggered that often outside of typical operational upkeep. And the array itself is fenced in, so we don't expect any large animals to get in there.
That concludes my questionings, and thank you for your patience.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Smolinski.
I have some questions with regard to your application to the state program. You described some incentives that, credits that the program offers that you would be applying for. Could you describe those in more detail?
Sure. So we are applying to the Adjustable Block Program, a program that comes from Illinois Power Agency, their traditional community solar program. So that program plans to award capacity to 1,600 megawatts of new community solar development over the next 10 years. And the plan just went into effect last year. But yeah, so that plan has a scoring system that determines priority of projects that are submitted into that program. You can get points for various things. And so for this particular site, we're getting points for a executed interconnection agreement. I believe we also have a top 2 queue position within the interconnection queue there, which gets you extra points. We're planning to use the pollinator vegetation, which gets you a point, and the agrivoltaic operations using sheep as grazers to maintain the undergrowth vegetation. That's another point there. And then I believe we have a preferred county siting points. There's no existing community solar projects within Door Township, and for, in particular, McHenry County, if you site within a township that doesn't have an existing project, then there's extra points for that too. So we would plan to get, I believe, 6 points for this project. You need a minimum of 5 to qualify. And so we think that would qualify us for this year's incentive. Like I said, the application opens up June 1st. We expect, I think, about 120 to 130 megawatts to be awarded this year. The current waitlist size is just over 20 megawatts. So it's about just over 100 megawatts becoming available this summer to projects that apply. And so we'll be applying to get within that bucket of capacity there.
So to further state this, the plan opens up on June 1st. Do you anticipate your application being in time for that?
We would hope to have it in time, but if not, it's rolling applications through the summer, so we'll apply whenever the project is eligible at that point. Yeah.
What does your intel provide to you about your competitors applying for these and taking up all of the available space?
It was pretty popular program last year, so we expect it to be popular again. The actual rec award amount has reduced from last year to this year by about 13%. So that might reduce demand a little bit, and then, you know, the actual constraints of the grid itself, there's less and less places that you can connect to without, you know, triggering major distribution grid upgrade costs. So we do expect the demand to slow down, but I would fully expect the full block to be spoken for in this next allocation, including our project. Like I said, the last wait list with qualified projects beyond the 120 megawatts that they originally allocated was just over 20 megawatts. So we expect the next wait list, so like projects that qualify but aren't awarded this summer, to at least be that big, but could get smaller here as we are in the second year of the program, and given the factors that I mentioned before.
I have no further questions, thank you.
Ms. Gardner?
Now you're talking about doing agrivoltaics using just grass and pollinator type plants, is that right?
Correct, yes, native pollinator species. I even have in the slides, I don't know if in my appendix, I have the 2 seed mixes that we plan to use, but yeah, it's a lot of flowering species in the buffers themselves, a little bit of milkweed, which grows taller. That's why we have in the buffers, so we don't get shading on the array itself. And then within the array, it's more grasses, more food that's friendly to the sheep and their consumption. But they should be able to kind of pick through all the species that are within the fence line there.
Okay, and what if you don't get enough farmers with sheep to keep this down to a reasonable height?
That is an important consideration. We are working with United Agrivoltaics, which is a sheep farming co-op. They have about 6,000 sheep under their control through their farmers, and currently operate on 93 sites in Illinois and neighboring states. So we're planning to use the co-op there to source our sheep and our farmers, and our contracts for sheep grazing would have a term of 3 years and need to be re-upped every 3 years. So if a sheep farmer, you know, can't commit to 3 years, then they're not going to execute that contract. And if they get to the end of their 3-year term and they can no longer maintain it, then we'll look for other resources within the co-op to provide the necessary sheep to graze.
Okay, I have another question or two about that, but let me ask this one first.
If I may, yeah, Brand with Amp Energy. Also, if we were speaking with the United Agrivoltaic consultant, and if for some reason the farmer can't make it out there, they're responsible for bringing along a contractor to mow, because we understand that that's a big commitment to have sheep out there and all these different sites.
So basically, these sheep will be commuting to eat once a week or something? Is that how that's going to work?
It's not once a week, it's more like a couple times a year. They'll come out there for a couple weeks at a time. It's hard to give you like a concrete answer because of other farms that they work with, and just how close these other farms are together.
Okay, has this program been implemented anywhere that you're aware of?
Yeah, so this consultant worked with other developers prior in this past November for that application period.
Okay, with solar panels?
Yep, yeah,
Grazing in
they call
between
it
them?
solar grazing. Yeah.
Solar grazing, okay.
Mhm.
And it works out?
Yeah, I think we have a site in Minnesota that have sheep on it.
Okay.
Have a couple.
Are there any other animals that could graze on this, like goats or
I think,
pigs? I don't know.
yeah, I think we typically don't do goats because they jump on the panels. But I think there are some other animals. Sheep are just kind of the most friendly for solar.
Okay. Let's see. Now, what kind of a fence are you talking about putting around this project?
We're proposing Mike Larkin, Amp Energy. We're proposing a fixed knot, thank you, Kim, fixed knot agricultural style fence here. The rule of fence itself comes in an 8-foot wide rule, so the fence is 8 foot high with that gap at the bottom. So we're expecting 8.5 feet from the ground to the top of the fence. And you can see those posts there. Those would either be wooden or galvanized poles that support the metal mesh that is the fence that goes across there.
Okay, and you said it's a non-agricultural fence, is that what you
No,
said?
sorry, I said agricultural style fence, I
Okay.
guess. We've erected solar arrays on agricultural land with chain link fence before. Chain link, we don't think is the most aesthetically pleasing, and we believe this style fence more closely fits the look and feel of an agricultural area and land. So that's why we propose this fence.
Okay, so it's like squares instead of diamonds, is what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay, and how big a space are the holes?
That's a good question. I believe they're 4-inch by 4-inch, but I would have to confirm.
Yeah, usually it's 4 to 6, but it looks smaller in the picture, that's why I'm asking. Okay, and how long has Amp Energy been in business?
Amp Energy has been in business, I think since at least 2008, developing projects within the United States. We first started in Minnesota. So yeah, just over, I can't do math, just about 15 years, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Schneider. Thank you. I have a few questions, and we're going to want to play with some of your slides too, if you don't mind. Could you put up a side view of the panels when they're racked, showing the distance between racks and so forth?
So we have a side view in the upper right there. I believe on the site plan itself, it has our inner row spacing. So I'd have to actually have
Some
one.
of these things are so small,
Yeah,
I
sorry.
can't see them. And I thought the public might enjoy it as well.
So yeah, our proposed inner row spacing is 20 feet. So that would be 20 feet between basically the center of the row, like
Where the posts would be,
where the
for
posts,
example.
yeah.
And the photovoltaic modules on the racks are how wide? Not long, just interested in width. Because they're gonna tilt, we know that.
I don't have an exact measurement for you this time. We're currently proposing the Vikram Paradia modules. I'd have to pull up a spec sheet here to get their length, but we typically do 2 in portrait, so they're kind of stacked like that. And we don't have that side profile up anymore, but yeah, 2 side by side, and then obviously going down the row, stacked on top of one another. We refer to that as 2 in portrait. And like I said, hoisted on the single axis tracker, rotating from east to west throughout the day.
It's kind of important to answer my next question. You've seen these installations up close and personal. Are they generally 3 feet wide, 4 feet wide?
Oh, the width of
Yes.
the, got it. I would say, these are pretty big panels. I would say that's maybe 8 feet across there, the 2 in portrait. Sorry, go ahead.
This is Brant with AMP. They're just under 4 feet wide.
4 feet wide? Okay, and the racks are how far apart from each other?
20 feet.
20 feet. So you've got probably, when they're deployed horizontally, like they would be at noontime-ish, probably have about 16 feet between racks when they're horizontal?
Correct.
Okay. And my next question is, if you were to do just a traditional solar array, would that distance not decrease considerably? Like typically, it's been my experience to about 8 feet,
The traditional as in like a fixed tilt?
correct?
Correct, yes. Fixed tilt can be a more dense array because, as you said, the panels don't rotate, so you don't get the competing shading effects. But yeah, with single axis trackers, like you said, there's typically a larger inter-row spacing here. Yep.
Okay, so then my next question would be, the only reason that I see, if you correct me if I'm wrong, to make this facility much larger than it would need to be on a traditional solar array is basically just to get the extra point with the state.
There's no additional points awarded for using single axis trackers versus a fixed tilt.
No, I mean for the agrivoltaic portion. I thought you mentioned that was an extra point.
Correct, yep, that is an extra point.
So for you to get one extra point would necessitate probably semi-trailer transport of these sheep. I live right by Port King Packing, and the trailers come in with the pigs several times a day, and I would assume it would be the standard freight, animal freight type trailer of that same variety. How many sheep do you feel would need to be dispersed during one of these maintenance periods for some facility of this size?
Per deployment, we would expect 2 sheep per acre. So the acreage inside the array here is, well, the array itself occupies 23 acres. The area inside the fence is about 32 acres. So times 2, yeah, that would be 64 sheep.
60
maximum.
plus sheep. Okay, I'm gonna leave that at that. I'm just gonna make a comment for my next point. We are going to want to ask you and quiz you in much more detail on the grasses versus the pollinator mixes, especially with colleague to the right. We'll probably want to really get into that issue. So I'm just saying you might want to start pulling up that information. My last question is, during your opening statement, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you were addressing the landscape buffer that's currently shown on the east side, closest to Dean Street for everyone in the audience, you mentioned the fact that this project is really set back far enough from the road that you really don't need the landscape buffer per the requirement, but somehow or another, you made a mention that that landscape buffer might change to accommodate agricultural operations that are either currently in place or planned to be in place in the future. What did you mean by that landscape buffer might change?
So the current tenant farmer of the land, Mr. Larry Eddy, he's got a cattle pasture on the northeast corner there. So see those wetlands, the northeast here? That's a pasture, and then there's a pasture, existing pasture south of the array. So in between those two, just east of the array itself, there's like an electric fence corridor to allow passage of the cows between the north and south pasture. As we currently have this vegetative screen sited on the site in this current site plan, I believe it is interfering with that corridor. So it might just have to be, pushed to the east a bit, or reduced in scope there to allow that continued movement of livestock between pastures.
I have nothing further at this time.
Ms. Beverly?
Thank you. I just wanted to go back to your application, and I'm going to read part of it for you. In the vegetative maintenance plan for your application narrative, you said that you would design a comprehensive landscape plan in consultation with McHenry County in order to provide stormwater management, suitable ground cover, and vegetable screening in order to minimize the disruption to the local water resources and to mitigate the visual effects of the solar farm. The plan will be compliant to the county's native vegetation performance standards for solar farms, section 1656030 pp.2. Now, the plan that you've testified to is inconsistent with the native vegetation performance standards, and there's no mention of sheep grazing or agrivoltaics anywhere else in your application. So I was just wondering if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, this is a recent amendment to the plan that we've introduced here, just to sort of further go along the current use of the land and keeping some of its agricultural qualities. Yeah, I guess in the application itself, said we would conform to the standard vegetation, I'm sorry, I forget what it's called, the standard vegetation standards of the county. Kim, I'm not sure if you can pull up the slide deck, and I can share these slides with everyone too. But yeah, so we modified the seed mix to be more in line and friendly with the, if you click that one. So that's the array seed mix. And then the next slide is the buffer seed mix, which has a greater diversity of pollinator species here. But this was made with the help of United Agrivoltaics Consulting and their seed specialists, looking at native species and looking at what's appropriate for sheep grazing here. Yeah, I thought we kept, in the special use permit itself, the language pretty open to modification there, and saying that the full established plan will be provided, when we go for the building permit, and the full operation and maintenance plan will be in place. And so the agrivoltaics plan is a portion of that, obviously, as we'll have to maintain those activities within the array itself. But yeah, this is a relatively recent, change to sort of the undergrowth of the array itself. If we were held to the county's vegetative standards and the seed mix that the county suggests, then we are open to go back to our consultant there and see if that seed mix is appropriate for our planned use here in agrivoltaics.
Thank you. I have another question. Getting back to Mr. Schnabel's point about the distance between the panels. If you were required to do only native pollinator species underneath the panels and not have room for sheep grazing, how far apart would the rows be?
They're currently proposed to be 20 feet. The previous slide, that's the array seed mix. That's a shorter growth species here, more grasses and more vegetation that's friendly to sheep consumption itself. But these we wouldn't expect to get much beyond 3 feet high. And then with the regular sheep grazing, we would hope to keep it well under, or keep it below 3 feet, so we don't have any sort of shading impacts to the panels themselves.
No, I want to clarify my question. So the idea behind agrivoltaics generally that we've seen in the past is that if you do only native pollinator species, even with the tracking panels, you only have to space the panels about 9 to 10 feet. If you're doing agrivoltaic activity, you have to space the panels 20 feet apart, and you're consuming much more of the acreage than you would for the same megawatts on a native pollinator planting. Can you speak to that on this project?
Yeah, we would go with the 20-foot row spacing even if we weren't doing agrivoltaics, just given the single axis tracker system and the reduction of inner row shading with that type of system.
Okay, so then your plan would make no changes to the actual design of the solar project, the footprint, anything like that, regardless of whether you had sheep or not?
Correct, other than probably the seed mix, yeah.
Okay. I have one more question. So under the adjustable block program and IPA reporting requirements for agrivoltaics, there's no penalty if you never have sheep come on the property. Like if you can never get the sheep to work out, but you're growing the grasses and you're mowing them, there's no penalty. You're still doing agrivoltaics under the adjustable block program.
Brant with Amp Energy. We're required to have yearly reports of the herd, like how much they grow. So that's a requirement of our consultant and the sheep farmer to provide every year to make sure we're maintain their requirement of the program.
I have a follow-up question then. So as I understood it, and I'd like you to correct me, you can have a contract with a sheep farmer. There's a narrow window several times a year for sheep grazing versus mowing. And if the sheep farmer can't get the sheep to you to graze, you're permitted to mow. What if they never work out to get the sheep to you? Are you just growing grass then that you're mowing down? Is there any penalty to never having sheep?
Right, so I think they would probably see that the herd hasn't grown or there's no numbers to report. And then, yeah, we would be in penalty there. And I'm not sure what the IPA has put out as far as what happens if you're not in compliance. I don't know if they've built that out yet. We're just trying to follow kind of as best we can right now with what's come out. I think the agrivoltaics plan was finalized in October of last year.
Right. And I see on the United Agrivoltaics that there are farmers that are interested in sheep farming. This site in particular, just to be clear, you would keep the panels 20 feet apart no matter what. You would have sheep or it would be mowed, and you wouldn't be widening the panels to bring in a tractor to bale or anything like that.
That is correct.
That's all I have. Thank you.
I have a few questions regarding the wetlands and the environmental standards for this. So this site seems to be really rolling, that there's a lot of change in elevation. Will you be grading any of this, or are you just going to put the panels in as the grade that is currently?
We're typically able to place the panels on the existing grid with minimal changes to the grade itself, maybe in a few portions, but the panels themselves have a 15 to 20% grade tolerance, so they should be able to be placed as the grade currently exists in that field at this time.
And you mentioned trees that might be surrounding that would be taken out. Would you be taking out any oaks or hardwood trees to make this happen, or would you be willing to preserve the oaks that are there? If there are any oaks or walnut trees or other hardwoods?
I was at the site a couple weeks ago. The trees that we would propose to take are kind of between the vegetative screen, the eastern portion of the array there, as they currently exist. I'm not sure if they were oak or walnut trees. They were pretty small trees. But if there are any trees of concern, I'm sure we would be open to seeing if there's any way around taking them down. Like I said, the trees along that corridor there are pretty small. I can't confirm if any of those species do exist there, but anything in the
My big concern would be the mature, if there's big mature oaks, that are just so important to protect.
I'm not aware of any in that corridor where we propose to take them down.
Okay. I see that you did a wetland delineation, but I looked at some comments from our Water Resources Division, and the date was May 3rd. I don't know if you've seen this letter, but they said that your wetland delineation was completed outside of the growing season, and so you may, that we require a certified wetland specialist for McHenry County to complete the wetland determination report. And so, and then you'll need to follow their determination. So I just wanted to make sure that you're aware of that. And Let's see, what else was I seeing in here that was... And also, if you did have grading, you know, if you were filling in flood hazard areas, but I don't see any flood hazard areas here. But I do have a concern where you're going to have your temporary construction area with parking and everything. That's hydric soils. That might not be in a wetland, but you're real close to that buffer for that wetland that's currently delineated per your study. But, I mean, what will you do? There could be a lot of tile in that area, you know, if it's hydric, there's, you know, groundwater could be real close to the surface. What will you do to maintain the drain tile there from being broken as you're, you know, you'll be having a lot of construction activities there at that time? What will you be doing for that?
So as I did mention, we will be required to do drain tile survey of the property before we can go for building or construction permit. From what I know drain tile locating and survey is notoriously hard. So there is, you know, opportunity for mistakes to be made and drain tiles to be impacted. And so the agricultural impact mitigation agreement requires us to repair all drain tile breaks in a timely manner. So that, yeah, will be part of the EPC's construction scope to maintain any impacted drain tiles. For the construction laydown area / temporary staging area, parking area, that's a good point, being close to the wetland and being on hydric soils. I have seen on a lot of our construction projects where there's, you know, wetter ground, you know, especially after storms and things like that, not even necessarily near wetland. That obviously, you know, with heavy equipment, there can be rutting and impacts to the surface there. So we would probably employ a similar strategy that's required by many, kind of like a standard in a couple other states, Army Corps districts where they have jurisdiction of the farm wetlands, where they require you to like put down not plywood, but basically just kind of like sheet things for the equipment to be on. I'm not sure what the term is, but yeah.
I think I've seen those like along the highways when they're doing construction, and it's like just all these big like sheets of wood just to prevent compaction of the soil.
Correct, yeah. So if we started noticing, you know, rutting and disturbance of wet ground with the tire tracks, then we would employ the sheets. Yep.
And then regarding the grazing of the sheep, so how long would it take 2 sheep per acre to, you know, eat down that grass? Is there some formula for that, how that would work?
Our consultant advised us, like I said, 2 sheep per acre, and at least 2 deployments per year, you know, during the growing season, obviously when there is vegetation to feast on. But from what I've heard, it could be a couple weeks. Brand, I'm not sure if you have any more details on that, but we were told like twice a year, and each deployment would be, you know, anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks.
We might have more sheep farmers in McHenry County based on this, you never know. Okay, that's my only questions. Does staff have any questions for the petitioner?
Yes, just a couple questions. So for the vegetative buffer that you have along the east side of the project, was there a reason that was proposed at all, being that it is more than 500 feet from any right-of-way or non-participating residence, or was it just kind of a voluntary consideration?
Yeah, just a consideration for the people who currently live on Dean Street there, looking to really just minimize impacts to people who are involved. That side of the street, the east side, is a little higher, so they're kind of looking down into the site. So we thought that would be a good consideration there. Yep.
But it could be removed if there was concern with the cows or anything with the path there?
Yep, correct.
Okay. And then the only other question I had was on the height from the ground to the bottom of the panel when it's at full tilt. It looks like you have a 1 foot minimum clearance there. Is that pretty standard? It looked like some of the growth might be above a foot. Would that cause any issues with any of the growth underneath the panels?
Yeah, 1 foot is probably too little. We typically do 3 feet. I'm sorry, that says 1 foot. Yeah, we typically have a 3 foot clearance. And like I said, the array vegetation could get up to 3 feet, but the idea is to hopefully have the sheep grazing occur often enough where it doesn't
Okay.
start blocking. And even if vegetation does get up to 3 feet, that panel right there is at max tilt at sunset. So, you know, the shading losses of that are pretty minimal given the arrays and producing at maximum capacity at the last hours of daylight anyway.
And then since the state did increase the maximum height to 20 feet recently, would that increase the height, do you think, or you would still try to keep them at 15 feet max?
No, I think we would still try to keep them below 15 feet. With the current panels that we are proposing here, the Vikram panels in this single axis tracker setup, I think we actually expect it to be a max height around 12 feet. But this was just the note we put on there, I believe to be in compliance with the former bylaw standards before the state standards took in effect. But yeah, we don't plan to exceed 15 feet, and we expect final max height to probably be around 12, 13 feet.
Okay, that's all I had.
Okay, if any member of the public has a question, I'd ask you to come up, raise your hand. Does anyone have a question on this petition of his testimony? Okay, you can come up, identify yourself, and again, you have 3 minutes for your questions. Vicky's going to be my timekeeper.
Hi, my name is Stefan Ganvik, and I live in Union on Dunham Road, which is not exactly this property, but based on the new requirements that I was unaware of 3 minutes, I feel it's appropriate to bring this question up because it also applies to the property that I am going to be interested in. You, Mike, have quite often throughout this presentation discussed the decommissioning of these plants. And you also alluded to the fact that since this is a temporary installation, it really isn't going to affect anything. My first question to you is, has AMP Energy decommissioned any solar plants since they have been in business?
No, AMP has not yet decommissioned any projects yet, with the first ones being erected in 2008 in Minnesota.
So based on the complete submission that you had for this custom proposal for the county, I was able to get a copy of that. You're estimating a cost of $25,000 per megawatt to decommission the plant, and that in our particular case for the panel I'm interested in, we're looking at $125,000. You also, on page 11 of the submission, paragraph 2, state, and I quote, "Decommissioning involves removal of all solar farm equipment and infrastructure to a depth of 2 feet below grade." Many of the items that I'm seeing in this design here are well below 2 feet. The details of the racking system are not included in the drawings that I have seen. The underground wires and the galvanized pipe from your racking system also are not specified. So based on what I'm seeing here, at the end of 20, 30, or 40 years, a large portion of this plant is still going to be in the ground, left behind, based on your submission. Can you clarify that, please?
Certainly. So yeah, you're referring to the preliminary, decommissioning plan that we submitted with the special use permit application. In our standard language there, I think, yeah, we have 2 feet subsurface is what we commit to in that plan. The final plan that's actually executed with the county before building permit will have to be more rigorous, actually, given that it needs to be an engineer's estimate. The estimate on there is $125,000 total. It will likely be more than that, given the engineer's estimate and our previous experience with working with engineers to stamp their estimates. And the county requires, or at least in the former regulations, 150% of the estimate's value to be funded in the surety itself. So we could expect, the value of the financial instrument to be at least 50% more than the actual estimate of decommissioning cost. And then in the subsurface components, the piles themselves are pounded into the ground anywhere from 6 to 8 feet subsurface. In terms of getting everything 2 feet and above, we wouldn't like slice the pile and pull it out of the ground so we can leave the rest under the ground. You can, kind of wiggle it back and forth with a machine and rip the whole pile out of the ground. So even though it could go up to 8 feet below the subsurface, we would plan to remove the entire pile from the ground, as that steel is actually still, has value from a scrap perspective. And the agricultural impact mitigation agreement that we executed with the state, that requires us to remove all subsurface components up to 5 feet in depth. So we'd have to commit to that depth there. The conduits connecting from the combiner boxes at the end of the arrays, the strings to the equipment pad itself, those conduits are typically 3 to 4 feet deep, so we'd have to commit to removing all those as well.
You have 3 minutes, sir.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Anyone else have a question? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Jory Carafa, and I live on Dean Street, not directly across from the proposed spot where the panels would be, but pretty much across from where the sign is notifying about the hearing. So here I am. My first question, I know that approval standard 10 was about groundwater quality. Is there any concern about oil or gasoline going into the ponds or any of the wetlands down there? Because I do know that the cattle tend to hang out in them, and geese and sandhill cranes. So there's a lot of animals there.
Thank you for your question. It could be a concern, with the heavy operation or operating equipment that are on site during the construction period. The EPC contractor that we'll be working with, has their own spill standards. If diesel were to spill or some other fuel source or oil, and they have their standard procedures of which they would have to isolate that event and clean it up. So we would make sure we hold our construction firm to that standard and, minimize any sort of spread or infiltration of foreign, fuel matters below the immediate spot that occurred in the soil, if it were to occur.
I noticed, I think it's in the staff report, it talked about a crop productivity rating, and I think it said it was for the entire property. Is there that data available for just the area where crops are actually grown? Because a good portion of that we just saw on the map was like pond, which obviously you're not growing crops in the middle of a pond. So how's that calculated?
I think I would defer to the board on that. Is it the?
I think you're speaking of maybe the Soil and Water Conservation District report.
Mm-hmm.
There's like an ag score, right, for the soil?
Yeah, it was, I think for this property it was 78, and then it mentioned anything that was 80 or above the county encourages. But I thought the way it was worded made it sound like that score was for the entire property, which I feel like when you do the math on that and find averages, it's kind of misleading because not the entire property is used for crop production. Do you want me, I know I only have 3 minutes, so I could ask my next question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, because I think I have time for one more. So my last question was about the legal notice of public hearing, and I just think it's misleading. It says Walter W. Dalish Jr. as the trustee of Walter W. Dalish Jr. Living Trust, the property owner, sitting over there, can be reached at 2615 Dean Street. Are you aware that he doesn't actually live there? He lives in
It's
Barrington.
not, no, I've been to his house before. I'm aware he doesn't live there. Did we?
Is there a point where that's considered like fraudulent, that's very misleading on a legal notice?
Staff should answer that.
Kim, can you answer that?
Yeah, we would have taken the address from the application as to where it could be reached. I don't know if he receives mail there or anything, but being that he owns the property, I don't know, we would have to look into that, but yeah, if he owns the property, I would imagine that he could be reached there, but.
Because if someone else is, that's because someone else has always resided there.
Yeah, I mean, if he receives his tax bills there, I don't know, I would assume that he would be able to be reached there. I don't know where he receives tax bills.
Okay.
So.
Okay, your time is up. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Maria Libra, Union, 17906 Meadow Lane. I'm going to ask some questions because you're basically looking at doing many things, many places. My first question is, what is your incentive to ever decommission one of these things, since you're asking for a conditional use, not a permanent use?
Our incentive to decommission would probably be once the array isn't producing an amount of power that we feel is sufficient to continue operation. The panels themselves have a 25-year warranty. The minimal operational lifetime of this array would be 20 years. And so we'd expect the panels to perform up to spec or up to what we expect for at least for 25 years. And so yeah, there isn't, I guess, much of an incentive for AMP to decommission the site at the end. But like I said, the appropriate financial surety and agreements are to be in place where if AMP were to refuse to decommission at the end of the lifetime of the facility, so showing proof it hasn't been operating for a set period of time, then the county would be able to draw upon the funds in that financial surety to pay for the decommissioning. But that's not in AMP's interest here. We're looking to be, like I said, the long-term owner and operator and be good stewards to the community. And as long as AMP is still in existence, it would be more than likely that we would take the decommissioning in our own hands.
Okay, well, I understand you guys have been in, I actually was looking up, it says you were founded in 2009, but you're out of Toronto, Canada, you're based, and you're subsidized through the United States. So I'm curious as to why are we not discussing that you're from Canada originally? Your business is headquartered there?
Yeah, so AMP Solar Development, Inc. is a subsidiary under AMP Solar Group, which is based in Toronto, Canada. That group owns the different portions of the companies that are in various parts of the world. AMP has, sub-entities in India and Spain, and in Canada and Australia that all do different types of renewable energy development. But our firm actually, AMP Solar Group based in Toronto, sold AMP Solar Development, Inc. Or it actually didn't sell yet, it's still in process. There's a transaction in process taking place for AMP Solar Development, Inc. for the entire firm to be owned by Palisade and Fiera Infrastructure Fiera Infrastructure Partners based out of New York. And so then at that point, AMP would be under those firms as its own entity. But like I said, that sale is in progress at this point.
Okay, and you had talked about a lot of things with these subs. What is offered to the city as far as a benefit? Like why, as far as the benefit, would it be for us to have someone come in where perhaps it might take out $3 million in a small town value of homes? What is the value in them coming in and putting this in for the town? I mean, what does the town get out of it? What do the subs get? Like, do you actually give people that live in the community this
Okay, this is your last question, so you can answer.
Oh, I know, she doesn't like my 3 minutes, I always talk a lot, sorry, but I have a lot of questions. This is a big deal if you live right across from it. And I'll keep asking every time I can come up.
Thank you, these are good questions.
I try.
So yeah, anyone who's a ratepayer, a utility ratepayer with ComEd has the ability to subscribe to this array. And so theoretically, some of the generation of the array would offset your power usage in the local distribution grid infrastructure. And like I said, that 10% discount in power versus ComEd's normal retail rate would be applied for any power that utility ratepayer subscriber receives from the project in any given month in bill.
Do you know what a family for average cost
Your
would be?
time is up.
Well, I think that's important to know for a.
Well, you have to honor
Okay, well,
that.
if you could give us an idea what the money would be.
Would
it would be
someone
great.
else like to ask a
Only
question?
Millions of property value.
Anyone else want to ask a question? Yes, ma'am. You could tilt it down. There you go.
Hi, I'm Gina LaFever, and I'm a trustee on Seneca Township, so I'm kind of representing about 50, 75 people who showed up the other day at our meeting. So a couple things I've noticed, and I don't feel as well versed as I'd like to be on this, but first of all, clearly you guys are not from this area. You know nothing about us. You know nothing about the community. You know nothing about the depth of McHenry County. So,
This is the time for questions.
yeah, I'm getting there. I wanted to preface it.
Okay.
So, do you know what A1 means?
In terms of the zoning district, agricultural,
What does that mean in terms of soil?
I'm not aware.
Clearly. So also, you said that this company is an LLC. So if this company goes bankrupt or folds, what company protects our interest?
The project company itself, ASD Wildcat Illinois Solar LLC, is a subsidiary under AMP Solar Development, Inc.,
Which is being sold.
which, yes, is breaking off from AMP Solar Group and becoming its own U.S. entity here. Like I said, we have Palisade and Feeder Infrastructure Partners who invested in us and bought this portion of the company from AMP Solar Development, Inc., or AMP Solar Group. So yeah, it would be ultimately come to the responsibility would fall under AMP Solar Development, Inc.
And if they went bankrupt?
If they went bankrupt, then yeah, it would be.
It would be ours.
Too bad, so sad.
I believe that's what the decommissioning bond is in place for prior to
If someone
construction.
holds them accountable.
It's in place with the county prior to construction.
And so does the county already have the money?
We aren't at the building permit phase yet.
So if, once you get that building in place,
Then
you
it'll
give
be
the
in
county
place
the-
by the building permit.
so there's a chunk of money set aside.
And I would say that the state has set the standards for that. Maybe Kim, you can clarify, we used to have a higher standard and the state said that we had to meet their standard.
Correct.
So that standard is set by the state.
So the money is all in place.
Well, the amount of money that needs to be done and how it needs to be done, that's all been set by the state, and we can't make it any more restrictive than what the state has. Our hands are tied on that.
I understand what you're saying. My question is the money already in place? I don't know about the amount of money. I'd like to know, is it in a bank account that sits there for the purpose of decomposition?
At the point of building permit, it will be.
It will be.
Yes.
More later, thank you.
Okay. For the woman who asked the question on the soil productivity index, I wanted you to know that that is on the full acreage. It's on the full L-shaped piece. It's over 100 acres. That is, I looked it up in the soil report. Anybody else with a question?
I'm Josh Brown. I have a question.
You have to
about a
come up to the-
different- I have a question. Should I talk now about one of the other proposed farms?
No, we're just talking about Dean Street right now. You'll have the opportunity when we speak about the other petitions. Yes, you have a question?
Joseph Liebrand, 17906 Meadow Lane, Union, Illinois. So what is ensuring that the savings will be passed through our utility bills rather than ComEd's pockets, which has revenues of $15 billion annually? I'm asking this as it seems to be your rationale for getting the public on your side.
Good question, thank you. So yeah, the ComEd is held to the ICC standards set in place with the state in regards to community solar development. And so through the state standards that were established for the development of community solar in the state, this is a rule where, you know, the utility has to pass on those savings to the ratepayers if they are subscribers of that solar farm and if the solar farm has produced energy. And so there is, I'm not exactly familiar with all the mechanics that go into how the state audits ComEd and making sure those savings are passed on to the customer. But ComEd is held to standards here when it comes to community solar offtake and how they have to pass the savings on to the consumer.
Okay. So is the decommissioned bond tied with inflation, or is it like a set fixed rate that once the project starts, that's what you're getting? Then let's say 20 years down the line, the money, let's say, might not be enough, or is it going to be increased depending on just circumstances in the economy?
That's a good point too. So like I said, we'll get the engineer estimate to decide how much, how valuable the financial instrument has to be, whether it's a surety, bond, cash escrow. And so, what was I gonna say? In the plan that we submitted for the special use permit, we are proposing a decommissioning agreement that stipulates that the county is able to reorder that engineer estimate every 5 years. And if it is significantly different from the established surety value, then they can force us to increase the value of that surety per the new estimate every 5 years.
Okay. Then why is AMP splitting into pretty much like two companies? It seems like, why is it being sold into the New York group, I believe you said?
Yeah, I'm not sure all the dynamics behind that, but I know our new owners, Palisade, Fiera, are, you know, infrastructure investment and, portfolio investment firms that are interested in getting involved in renewable energy. So I think they found this as a good way to get involved in renewable energy development in the United States. They like the scale, they like how community solar is in a lot of different states, they like the diversity of the portfolio itself, and I think they also like pretty much the steady state of returns. You know, once you build it and you're billing and generating credits, it's a pretty steady, not very variable revenue stream, and so I think they're interested in investing in infrastructure that has those sort of revenue streams and green aspects to them.
Out of time, or do you have one more?
Time. Yeah, you're out of time. Anybody else have a question? Okay, so at this time, we'll start with statements from the public, starting with the staff. If you would want to summarize your staff report, Kim?
Okay, so as we mentioned, the subject property is zoned A1 agricultural district and is surrounded by agricultural zoning as well. Our surrounding land uses, mainly agricultural. There are some residential uses across Dean Street, as well as on the subject parcel to the east of the project area. Our future land use designation does call for residential in the area. We haven't seen a whole lot of that at this point, but that is where it's going to be tending to go, I guess, in the future. And I did want to just mention that this does comply with the support of development of commercial solar energy facilities that's outlined in the 2030 and beyond update of the land use plan. I should note, I think, I don't know if I missed this, but you mentioned 150% was the decommissioning estimate bond that we would require. That was another change with the state, it is only 100%. But yes, that would be in the way of a surety or a bond. I think that's all I've got. Everything is in compliance with the state's regulations, so we would not have any objections to the approval.
Does any members of the board have questions for Kim? Yes, Mr. Cozen.
Was has a comment been received from the city of Woodstock?
No, we have not received anything from Woodstock?
Any comment from the McHenry County Conservation District?
No.
No other question.
Okay, so at this time, before we take comments from the members of the public, we're just going to take a short break, like 5-10 minutes.
takes over.
I'm calling the meeting back to
The
order.
unfortunate reality.
And at this point, anybody that would like to make a comment specific to this petition is allowed to do so. Again, you have a 3-minute time limit. You need to come up and state your name and address, and then you have 3 minutes to state your opinions on this petition. Would anyone like to come up and state an opinion? Yes, sir. And again, it has to be specifically about this petition on Dean Street.
Yes.
Okay.
Again, my name is Stefan Ganvik, Union, and I am commenting on this property, which also will apply to other properties that will be discussed today. You made several comments about, both in your proposal, submission to the county, and here today, that property values will not be significantly impacted, and it is a temporary inconvenience of 20, 30, or 40 years, of basically a generation before the land goes back to its prior use. I have supplied to the county board here 3 studies, 2 indicating what the property value could go down to depending on the size of the solar farm and its location. And as a summary, it's about 10% for the properties that
You
could be
have
surrounding.
submitted that to the county?
It was emailed to you, yes.
Do you have that?
Yes, I did distribute that.
Okay.
And in addition to that particular item, we have a survey that was just completed of 100 Illinois residents who are interested in purchasing property in the state of Illinois. 25% of the respondents, again, you have that, indicated that they would not be willing to purchase a property next to or adjacent to a solar field. 25% indicated that they would at least expect a significant price reduction for the eyesore that this property would be generating, and 50% had no comment. So I believe those are valid concerns for this property and all others. And I will take your comment after my 3 minutes, which I guess are up.
They don't have a comment.
Oh,
It's
no
just
comment.
your opportunity to make a statement.
That is my comment.
Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment? Again, it would be on this petition. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
You got a 3-minute increment.
And I would ask that if the testimony becomes really repetitive and you're saying the same thing that someone else had said, I would ask that, we want to be able to move this along, that, you state something different, maybe that something has been stated.
Okay, hi, my name is Linda Eddy, and I'm here to speak against the conditional.
And your address, please, Ms. Eddy.
And I live at 2604 Dean Street, directly across from the farm. I'm here to speak against the conditional use of the permit 2023-016. I own and reside at the 2604 Dean Street in Woodstock, Illinois, which is directly across from the proposed location of the solar panels. I also own the address of 2620 Dean Street. The first reason I'm against the proposal is the impact of my property value. The reality is the solar field panels are very much an eyesore. Although the solar panels may be legally far enough away from my living room, as the law states, but it fails to consider how far you can see an open country. Plus, you offered to put grass lines up. That partial that you're talking about is a hill. It has a very much an uprising. When you drive down Dean Street, you can see it. The other reason was stated about who lives at the property on the petition. I will skip that. Furthermore, the proposed location has been farmland for over 200 years. The farmers caring for the land have worked hard to correctly tile the area in order to minimize crop production, and the surrounding farms, not just that one. A change such as proposed will strongly impact more than just the crops at 2615 Dean. After the crops have been harvested, the cattle are usually left out there to eat and graze for winter and stuff. This is also a dual use, which would be a loss to them. McHenry County has a long history of agriculture. This is the history that needs to be preserved. According to the farmers The American Farmland Trust, more than 31 million acres of U.S. agricultural land have been permanently lost to urban expansion since 1982. Even more concerning is that an additional 175 acres of farmland and ranch land are lost every hour to make way for housing and other industries. This proposal just makes the problem worse. The staff reports that the solar panels will leave the land will be able to farm in the future. But anyone knows agriculture will understand it's not easy to start up and work in the field if it hasn't been fertilized and kept up to the potential it is at. Just like you stated, the number is at 78, the score. If that's the whole farm, I don't know how that could be the pasture lands and stuff, because that is not farm, use and stuff. That score would be lower. You are just giving the score of the land that's worked. And that number would be higher because that property that you want to use is farmable and tillable. It wouldn't be as low as the other parts, but I'm sure that it brings down that whole average number. And then my final reason that I'm really against it is because of the Kishwaukee headwaters conservation areas are directly across the street. This 153 acre also includes 1.75 miles of trail and, excuse me.
Time is up, yeah.
Okay. And that is sponsored by the county.
Does anyone else want to make a statement? Yes, ma'am.
Maria Liebrand, 17906 Meadow Lane Union. Something I just want to make a statement about that I don't think maybe the big businesses are thinking about is when a company comes in to a small town like, for instance, Woodstock Union, whatever it is, if you come in and you take out part of this $3 million in value, say the homes, if they're worth $300,000, say 300 homes, you're going to reduce their value if they're under 1/10 of a mile by 5 to 7%, which is 15,000, 5%, 7% is 21,000 if it's a $300,000 home. So right there alone, $3 million in property value, just if there's only 300 homes. And if there's more than 300 homes, which is a heck of a lot more in Woodstock, you're taking millions and millions of property value out from people's homes. And if you're under 1/10 of a mile, it's the worst, but you still are going to be affected up to 5 miles away. And a lot of the places that they're putting this is in many corners of the towns. So to me, it's like you're devaluing our towns. We don't have $3 million in Woodstock and Union to just give away in property value. We work hard for our money. We work hard for our equity, for our homes. And I'm sorry, I appreciate what you guys are trying to do solar-wise, but there's plenty of farmland where there's nothing around, way out further, sorry, but not by our residences. I would really appreciate if the board would consider that the people, thousands of people that have said on forums that I represent from I go to Woodstock to Union, they don't want this in our area because it takes away our country viewscape. We have an industrial viewscape. I can look across and see a beautiful country land. I moved to agriculture land 20 years ago for a reason, and I also don't think anyone else wants their properties devalued, and they don't want a solar panel to look out outside. It's just, there's tracking devices, there's all sorts of things you're gonna have to take care of, plus fencing. Who wants to see fencing in there? So devaluing property in our towns, it's just wrong to me. I just wanted to say I worked my tail off for my life. I don't appreciate that a big company can come in and you guys say there's nothing we can do because the state says there's nothing you can do. You can't say anything about it. And I feel for you guys, but at the same time, where's our representation? Where's the person for Coral Township? Where is our representation for the people? If the state can just say we can't say anything about it, well then what the heck is that, a tyranny or is that a freedom? Because it doesn't sound like a freedom, it sounds like tyranny, and I don't like it.
Does anyone else? Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, I'm Jack Lampy. I live at 4203 Sunnyside Road in Woodstock, and I have a small farm there. But I guess this is my first experience in this forum, and I really appreciate the tenacity of the board, your questions this morning. This is educational for me, but I think we had a lot of good questions. I'm interested in the property we're talking about, and I'll comment on that later. But I think it's important to understand the terrain differences between these properties. I think they're significant in terms of soil composition, the water contamination in the Union area from Tekaloi. It's historical, Union very flat, flooding continuously, and continuous efforts to mitigate contamination in that area. So I'll have more to say when we finish this presentation, but I thank you.
Okay, does anyone else have a comment? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I introduced myself earlier. My name's still the same, Tori Carafa, and I still live at 2620 Dean Street in Woodstock. Something that I just would like to address and continue addressing is that you can see on the map a large, pretty much 2-acre pond near the proposed location, and there's a lot of runoff from the pond that goes back and forth all over out there. And that pond also serves as a migratory stop for hundreds of Canadian geese. And a concern I really have is what will happen with the geese and this large field of solar panels there. There is all sorts of research that I found that explains how harmful that can be for birds specifically. So I'm not sure why there's like indication that everything would be fine for it to be there. According to the Society for Conservation Biology, there are a lot of bad things that can happen. So species that are attracted to solar facilities can actually accidentally become victims of ecological traps. That can then impact the whole population. But further, I think more immediate a concern is solar flocks, where the birds fly into solar panels and then get burned or singed. Geese obviously are a water bird too, and we wouldn't want them to become stranded or unable to take off. I noticed that, let me find it on my notepad here, but one of the standards for approval had to do with not impacting people's ability to enjoy a property, and I have to wonder, like, is there a point where people can enjoy seeing all of the geese out there and just seeing nature? Because that, in my opinion, is the whole point. The reports have also talked about how this land is undeveloped. Well, no offense to anyone, but that's literally the point of farmland. It's not supposed to be developed. That's why it is the way that it is. And I just, like, there's been a lot of talk too about all of the industry and things that could be produced here. Let's not forget too about agriculture and all of the industry that brings to this county and its importance. And I know there's been talk about like big companies coming in. Why is it that we're supporting big companies' industry and then trying to edge out some of these small farms? That's a huge concern I have, and living in a county that has such a rich agricultural history, that should be a concern for everyone in this room. Thank you.
Anyone else? Before we close this, I would like staff to just tell members of the public a little bit, because the way we used to do the things for solar farms before this state law was passed, when someone came with a petition, they had to go through what's called staff plat review, where we addressed stormwater, we addressed drainage, we addressed roads and all that sort of thing. And now how that will be done and how that changed. I would just like, Kim, for you to explain a little bit how that will be done.
Sure. So, part of the state regulations that were just passed in January did state that public hearing needed to take place within 45 days of receiving application for solar. So that does not give us the amount of time that we would need to have a staff plat committee meeting where the different divisions could review the site plans. As Linnea had mentioned, there would have been in-depth reviews with regard to stormwater. Fire districts would be notified and have opportunity to make comments on the site plan, building requirements, things like that. So at this point, we are distributing copies of the site plan to the staff plat members so that they can make any preliminary comments. But based off of what the state is allowing for us to do, we cannot ask for drain tile studies or wetland delineations, stormwater permitting, any of that until after the conditional use has gone through. So all of that would need to be addressed during the permitting process.
But they will not get their permit until all that has been addressed.
Correct. It still needs to meet all of those standards of the ordinances.
It's just that we don't have that documentation, from the people that are paid in this county to protect us all and to handle those issues. That'll just be handled at a later time.
This is generally siting requirements, and that's what the state is saying. If it meets these specific siting standards, then it needs to be passed.
Right. So as our board has said, if you don't like the siting standards, you need to contact your state rep and say change the state law, because maybe we liked it better before this law was passed in January. That's your how you remedy this situation as it is right now. So now I'll ask the petitioner, do you have a closing statement, sir?
No, just thank you everyone for your time today and your questions. They were all really good questions.
So now I have a question for Kim and I guess for the petitioner. Just because I don't see that we're going to be able to complete the other two petitions today, I wonder if we should allow the petitioner to be able to vote on this one today, and then we do the other two petitions. We could start the second petition, but I know you have a deadline for June 1, and maybe you want this one voted on as soon as possible, and then we delay the other two. But we only have 6 members here today, and you need 5 positive votes to go with a recommendation for approval to the county board. So I will ask you, is that how you would like to proceed, that we just vote on this petition now and then we would hear the other two? We could start the other ones. Otherwise, we could wait and vote on all of them together when we have finished all 3 petitions.
That works for us, yeah. Thanks for giving us the optionality here.
So which option is?
The first one, voting on the first one and then maybe starting the second one and having to go to another date for those
Okay.
votes.
And you're comfortable with 6 people?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so,
Yeah, I just wanted to note, you probably will want to, at a minimum, open and each of the other 2, just so that we meet
So
the
that we
state
can
standard
continue
for
it.
opening the public hearing.
yeah. I don't think the voting portion is going to take too long. Okay, so I am going to close the hearing portion for this petition, and I will open the voting portion for application number 2023-016. The application is ASD Wildcat Illinois Solar LLC. The request is for a conditional use permit to allow for a commercial solar energy facility. And again, the PIN number is part of PIN number 13-18-400-001. And the property consists of approximately 43.145 acres and located on the west side of Dean Street, approximately 3/4 of a mile south of the intersection of Dean Street and US 14 in Door Township. We have some proposed conditions for consideration. I will go through those. These are recommended from the staff. Number 1, the conditional use shall have no time limit unless the use is abandoned, as specified in 16.56.030.pp.4 of the McHenry County Unified Development Ordinance. Number 2, site development shall be in substantial conformance with the site plan prepared by AMP Energy on May 1, 2023. Number 3, the decommissioning plan shall be applicable in part as well as in whole. If any portion of the commercial solar energy facility ceases to perform its intended function for more than 12 consecutive months, that portion of the facility shall be decommissioned in compliance with all the terms of the decommissioning plan. Number 4, a McHenry County stormwater management permit shall be secured prior to construction. Any damaged tiles shall be repaired at the expense of the petitioner and in a manner satisfactory to the Water Resources Division Manager. Number 5, a detailed landscape plan illustrating compliance with required landscape screening standards shall be approved by the zoning enforcement officer prior to issuance of a construction/building permit. Number 6, fencing shall be provided in compliance with the National Electrical Code as applicable. The use of barbed wire is prohibited. Setting fence posts in concrete is prohibited except for gate posts and where otherwise required for stability. Number 7, prior to construction, the operator shall enter into an agricultural impact mitigation agreement with the Illinois Department of Agriculture, IDOA, as required by the Renewable Energy Facilities Agricultural Impact Mitigation Act, 505 ILCS 147. All requirements of McHenry County Unified Development Ordinance 16.56.030.pp as amended, subject to State of Illinois Public Act 102-1123, shall be met or exceeded unless specifically amended by this conditional use permit. Number 9, all other federal, state, and local laws shall be met. Are there any other proposed conditions? Okay, at this time, I will entertain a motion to approve the conditions.
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Gardner,
I'll second.
seconded by Mr. Cozen. I'm going to call the roll call for the vote so I get this right. Ms. Gardner,
Yes.
Mr. Cozen,
Yes.
Mr. Schnabel,
Yes?
Ms. Beverly,
Yes.
Mr. Smolinski,
Yes.
and I will vote yes, so the conditions are approved 6-0. Then at this time, I would entertain a motion to approve the conditional use permit.
So moved.
Been moved by Ms. Gardner. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Cozen. Discussion, Ms. Gardner.
So this petition, or application for a solar facility is, as was stated, pretty much out of our hands. This one in particular is not a bad one. It is pretty far removed from people. And it's on property owned by a farmer who is able to do what he wants with his property. In this case, he's leasing it to a solar company because he's making more money than he does farming. He could have sold it to, a huge manufacturer and brought in all kinds of plants. He had the choice to do that. This was his choice. This is not as bad as it could be, as always. And again, it's not in your backyard per se, it is actually in his yard. And it will, I think, be far enough from almost everybody to really not interfere with your lives in any major way. I live by a sod farm. They're out there cutting rolls of sod all the time. It's fine. It really doesn't bother me. Before that, I lived in back of a landfill. That wasn't the best, but it wasn't the worst either. I am in favor of this type of energy, which is why I'm making this motion to pass this. Aside from the fact that, it's going to pass whether I want to or not. We can all vote no on this, but understand it's still going to happen. This one is employing a unique way of gaining their points with the state, with their agrivoltaic, agriculture, what is it? I forgot what it's called. It's farming in between the panels. And it's not going to have, heavy equipment going in between the panels, and it's not going to be things growing up in between the panels so it looks like giant weeds. This sounds actually different. I'm not sure that it will work, but, we don't know that any of these will work. So in that case, I've made my little speech. I shouldn't be doing that. I should just be stating the facts here. But I am in favor of this one.
Ms. Beverly.
Oh, thank you. I agree with Ms. Gardner's statement. Community solar is an elective subscription process, and you won't realize benefits from it unless you subscribe. I am an active community solar subscriber, and it's open to anyone in combat territory. In this application, it is very far removed from the road compared to others that we've seen. The agrivoltaics does not change the spacing of the rows. Therefore, if we were to not permit it, it would not decrease the size of the farm itself, as we have seen in other applications. This petitioner has the contracts, a plan, a seed mix, a partner to work on agrivoltaics with. I feel much more comfortable approving this application because they have demonstrated that they have a plan. I reviewed some of the documents that have been submitted by members of the audience, including the survey, I don't feel that it is persuasive, and really there's not anything we could do about it, but 100 people does not represent a valid sample size for a survey, in my opinion. As Ms. Gardner said, the landowner has entered into this agreement, and in this case, which is not always the case, the developer has worked with the tenant farmer to come up with a plan, and they are open to changing their plan. That is not always the case for solar farm applications, and I appreciate that you have reached out to the tenant farmer and that you're willing to work with them. So for those reasons, I'm in favor of this petition.
Mr. Scheinbaum.
Just for the audience's knowledge, our last solar proposal was also agrivoltaic, which means it wasn't a standard solar farm that you've been hearing about that have been in front of this board for the past couple of years, dozens and dozens of these cases. The last case involved actually farming and running tractors through the rows of panels, and it totally changed the equation as far as how pollinators would work and so on and so forth. And some members of this panel, including myself, did not vote to approve that particular last agrivoltaic package that we heard. Now, this one is different in a major respect because we're still planting something throughout the entire facility as opposed to plowing and planting and possibly running tractors into racking and so on and so forth. I'm not at all wild about the animal aspect of it with the sheep. I think it's ridiculous to start trucking in sheep twice a year and plopping them down there for a month and having someone take care of them and water them and everything else. I don't like that idea. But overall, it's a much more amenable plan than the last one that we heard, in my opinion, and for that reason, I will support this application.
Mr. Smolinski.
Yes, yes, I am a supporter of solar farms in general, and specifically with these latest ones that have come down that incorporate agrivoltaic and pollinator procedures within them. I think those are just excellent way to do it. I was very impressed with the presentation that this petitioner had with their plan. It seems that it's been very well thought out. I agree very much with Ms. Beverly's comments to the specificity of this, and I will support it.
Mr. Cozen.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I need to recognize that we are operating under fixed standards, both the conditional use as well as the state-adopted Public Act 102-662. And as much as we wish to take pen to pencil with the testimony heard and the comments received, we are limited by those standards in addition to the imposition that the state has imposed a shot clock of 45 days. Nonetheless, it is appreciative to the detail that the research has brought forward, the length of the public record. However, no factoids have been essentially presented of sufficient nature to dissuade me to vote in favor of this petition. Thank you.
And I would just add that it's been the public policy of this county in our 2030 comprehensive plan and beyond to support the construction of commercial solar energy facilities within existing agricultural areas. I would say on this parcel, I mean, we were talking about the buffer because the farmer is grazing cattle on part of the farm that will not be part of this solar facility. And so, you know, grazing is part of farming. And so grazing sheep in this area is farming. And so being able to produce energy and produce food is, I think, a benefit to all of us. And it is on, a lot of this is prime farmland, or prime farmland is drained. But we've got to remember that at the end of this life of this solar farm, when everything is removed, it's not like other type of uses where the soil is so then disturbed that you can't go back to agriculture. You can easily go back to agriculture when this is done. And at that point, we'll have even less prime farmland around. And so this is a way to really, in my mind, and I'm a farmer, to protect prime farmland in down the road, so that we produce energy for a while, and then, you know, something else comes around that maybe is a better way to produce energy, but that soil is still there, and that soil is critical to producing food. And having a solar farm on this parcel does nothing to impact the future ability to continue to produce food on this parcel. So I would also say that I believe it meets the standards in our ordinance. They've addressed the standards for conditional use and for the specifics of a solar farm, and so I agree with my colleagues, and I'll be in favor of the request. So I will call for the vote. Ms. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Cozen?
Yes.
Mr. Schnabel?
Yes.
Mr. Smolinski?
Yes.
Ms. Beverly?
Yes.
And I will vote yes too, so this will go to the county board with a 6-0 vote approving. Now I will go ahead and I would like to open the next petition. We won't be able to hear testimony much on this today because we have to be out of this building by 4:30. But I want to be able to open this hearing so that we can continue this to a future date. So we're closing the hearing on 2023-016, and I'm opening the hearing on application 2023-017. Applicant is ASD Seneca, Illinois Solar LLC. The request is a conditional use permit to allow for a commercial solar energy facility. This is part of PIN number 12-33-300-004. The property consists of approximately 41.851 acres and is located on the north side of Ocock Road, approximately 1/2 mile east of the intersection of Ocock and Dunham Roads in Seneca Township, Illinois. And then I'm asking for direction, Kim. Can I just then go ahead and open the other one as well, or do I continue this first?
Continue.
Okay, so we'll continue this 2023-017 to a future date. We'll look on the calendar. Does the 14th work for the petitioner, June 14th?
Yeah, that works for me.
Okay, so this petition will be continued to June 14th, 2023. So then I want to close the hearing portion for that until it's continued on June 14th. And we will open petition number 2023-018.
Excuse me, is there some particular time we should be booking, or the whole day? We should just.
Oh, I'm sorry, on June 14th, that'll be at 1:30 p.m., and it'll either be in this room or the next room down the hall.
Will those be one at a time, so we're not sitting through them again and waiting for the next ones? Like we were
Unfortunately,
supposed
that's how we
today?
have to do it.
Yes, correct. So the first one will be Ocock Road. And then when we're finished with that, then
It's
we'll we'll open the next hearing and we'll see if that we can, don't you think we can do the same that day? Yeah. Yeah, so we'll do 2023-018 probably in the same day. So now I'm going to open the hearing portion for 2023-018. This applicant is ASD Coral, Illinois Solar LLC. The request is a conditional use permit to allow for a commercial solar energy facility. This is part of 3 different PIN numbers. They are 17-03-300-008, part of PIN number 17-03-400-004, and part of PIN number 17-10-200-001. The property consists of approximately 27.177 acres and is located on the south side of Hemmingson Road, approximately 4,750 feet west of the intersection of Hemmingson and McHugh Roads in Coral Township, Illinois. And I'd like to continue this hearing to June 14th at 1:30 p.m. in the same building at that time. So at this point, because we have to be out of this building at 4:30 and to start testimony and everything is just going to be too difficult, we'll just close the hearing for today. And this meeting will be continued on June 14th at 1:30 p.m.